guys, Tyler Newman here, and today I'm with
Billy Harris. Nice to meet you guys.
And so Billy is really my secret weapon when it comes to optimizing my life and really trying to get ultimate and extract as much performance out of myself and my body as possible. And we just wanted to sort of share what I've learned working with Billy and just share some insights into sort of what Billy teaches and how he helps entrepreneurs like myself get more performance. So in your own words, you sort of want to explain what you do.
Yeah, so I developed a high ticket consulting business in which we're helping entrepreneurs like Tyler, for example, in the info product, e-commerce, digital marketing, or real estate space optimize their health and performance. So I've been doing that for now about 3 years. As I said, working with individuals like Tyler, so we've got 100 individuals in the group right now, all around doing around 100K per month with their businesses. And yeah, we put in place systems to optimize their sleep, nutrition, body, mind, time, and focus to obviously maximize their output and efficiency day to day, and therefore compete with the best of the best in terms of business and obviously overcome any hurdles they're facing day to day.
Yeah, so before I started working with Billy, I didn't know too much about the sort of, anything really what I've learned from working with Billy now, but there's a lot of myths out there. I used to think successful people would only sleep 4 hours per night and then they'd work 20 hours a day, and I thought what I thought was a good diet, what I thought I had good sleep wasn't good sleep. And now that I've been through and tried to improve a lot of those variables in my life, my performance in my business and in life has just improved. So do you just want to should we go through like the different variables like sleep and all the ones you mentioned, really like go through the low hanging fruit? And
yeah, for sure. I'll elaborate on the reasons why we started this process in the first place and obviously applied it to individuals like you anyway. So first and foremost, when I was working as a personal trainer in London, I came across individuals in the recruitment business who were doing very well financially speaking, but often at times they were burning out. So they'd work like 16-hour days, 18-hour days, barely sleeping, often surviving on just caffeine and often other stimulants or drugs actually, and realistically as well, quite often as well. And they were kind of adhering to the whole grind hard mentality that Gary Vee was advocating at the time, where he's saying like sleep 4 to 6 hours per day in your 20s and your 30s to the point where you're 40 and have loads of money in the bank account. And it doesn't really work particularly well. It doesn't pay off very much long term either. And in terms of their output and efficiency, it was at like 30% of what it could have been. So obviously realized that was something which people needed to optimize and overcome. And noticed that the people who were doing the best of the best in the business world, like Jeff Bezos, for example, Tony Robbins, they were all taking care of their health and performance and optimizing their system, because at the end of the day, we're like a car. If you can't fuel yourselves correctly, you won't be able to perform day in and day out and obviously maximize your business, the decisions you're making in terms of your engagement with clients, etc., etc. So that was a massive point, obviously, that Tyler was talking about earlier, where he said he wasn't optimizing his sleep. Previously speaking, his diet was all over the place. And I remember when we first started working together, I think on our first call, you were talking about the Weetabix you were eating.
Oh yeah.
And the fact you just like downing cans of tuna rice, I believe, at some point as well.
Yeah, and I would eat really, really late, like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night just before I go to bed, and really not aware of how that was affecting my sleep and then how bad sleep affects the next day. So those changes alone just made a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tyler, when he first started working with us, he was obviously aware of the significance of his health and performance when it comes to his business and obviously the success that has as well. So he had an Oura ring, I believe, at the time. You've been wearing that for how long before?
I bought this in December, so I've had this 9 or 10 months now. And before wearing it, I thought my sleep was okay. I thought I didn't have any problem sleep. I'd fall asleep pretty quickly. I would wake up feeling groggy, but I thought that's just how everyone wakes up. And it wasn't until I started wearing this Oura ring, which tracks your sleep, that I knew how bad my sleep was at the time.
Yeah, so I kind of think about, in terms of quantifying your sleep, I think about it like looking at your bank account. So you could be saying to someone that you have £1 million in your bank account, but if you can't actually check your banking data, how on earth are you to know that you've obviously got that money in the account in itself? So when it comes to your sleep and optimizing that variable, we have to assess the metrics, hence why all of our clients have an Oura ring. Obviously, Tyler, prior to working with us, did have one, but he wasn't necessarily sure how to quantify that metric data and then take it and then utilize it and obviously use it to his advantage as well. So talk to me about that. So in terms of your sleep and obviously difficulty you're facing, what was the biggest difficulty you personally had?
One of the key things was, waking up feeling groggy, and then, for me now, especially the morning, the first 4 or 5 hours of the day is when I get the most work done, where I'm, my brain's fresh and I feel like there's a lot less resistance to my work. And back then, when I first got the Oura ring, I thought my sleep was okay, but then I start checking the stats. I see my deep sleep is crap, my REM sleep is crap, my awake time throughout the night, without realizing I'm waking up, and the actual time, if I'm going to bed, let's say at 11 and waking up at 7, I'm thinking I'm getting 8 hours sleep. Really, I was maybe get like 6.5 or just under 7, which, as you know, compound day after day, does affect your performance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest variable that we put in place in terms of lowest hanging fruits for Tyler actually was consistent sleep start and end times. So when we first started working together, what we do is we sign into his Aura Ring in terms of metric data to go through his dashboard, and we kind of look back over the past 3 months and see any common occurrences when it comes to his data. And one thing we noticed that his sleep start and end times are very inconsistent, and also in terms of environment as well. It wasn't particularly well optimized. This was prior to him living here in this apartment. You were living at home, I believe, weren't you? And in terms of environment being optimized, it was pretty minimal, right? So there wasn't anything.
Yeah, the bed wasn't as comfy as it could be. That didn't have blackout blinds, so the light would wake me up in the morning. We lived on a main road, so there was a lot of noise. I was having different sleep and awake times to my rest of my family, so they would wake up a lot earlier, and then the noise they would create would, it cause me, I wouldn't get the REM sleep at the end of my sleep cycle. But now I'm living here, I've got the blackout blinds, I've got aircon that's blasting the room so it's nice and cold. I've got a bed which I sleep much better in. I'm also not eating, I'm consciously not eating a fair few hours before I go to sleep as well. And just, I've got a wind down routine where, 30 minutes before bed, there's no phone, there's things like that. So
really and also helps. In terms of environment, it's much more quiet here also.
Yes.
That's another factor to be aware of. So in terms of lowest hanging fruits we put in place, as I said, consistent sleep start and end times is really important for Tyler when it comes to regulating his circadian rhythm and therefore getting better sleep metrics. Otherwise, if for example he's going to bed at 10 o'clock one night, 2 o'clock in the morning the next, he's doing too much work, or he's going out socially speaking, that's going to have a massively negative impact on his sleep metrics overall long term as well. So that's one of the massive impacts, or one of the things we put in place first. Obviously then in terms of environment, when he moved here, that was all set up very well. So that was really easy to put in place, really.
Yeah, and what about focus as well? If we talk about focus, because that was another thing I struggled with. What I thought I was productive, realities, if I look at the actual meaningful work was getting throughout the day, probably wasn't much, because it's very easy to sit down at your desk at 9 a.m. till 6 p.m. But if you actually look back and reflect how much meaningful work hours have I done during that period, it was probably shockingly low. But we've implemented a lot of things to help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the key questions I ask clients when they're actually coming up to sign and work with us, of course, is how many hours of deep work they're conducting per day, or how many hours of deep work they're getting out of themselves per day. And they often say 6 to 8. And then after 2 months of having worked with us, they say realistically they're doing about 1 prior to. And in terms of variables that feed deep work, you have to assess that from a biological standpoint as well, a biochemical standpoint. And obviously we're looking to maximize every pillar of health and performance. So as we said, sleep already, nutrition, body, mind, time, and focus. All of those variables feed one another, including obviously focus, which is the end objective, and flow states, reaching that day in, day out, right? So when it comes to reaching an optimal state of focus and obviously being able to work for 4 to 6 to 8 hours per day in very solid chunks, the first variable we need to obviously reassess and obviously optimize will be your sleep. That'll be the first thing we've discussed already. When it comes to other kind of lowest hanging fruits and tactics you could incorporate, it's a case of maximizing, for example, morning work periods or afternoon work periods, depending on what you find best for yourself and obviously your role in terms of your job as well. Tyler, I believe, doesn't take calls until about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, or is trying not to at least. Yeah,
so all proactive work is in the mornings for me, and then when it's more reactive or it's calls, anything like that, it's 2 or 3 p.m. onwards.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also basic principles you can apply, basic things and techniques you can incorporate, like, for example, working for 50 minutes and having a 10-minute block. And within that 10-minute break, what you want to incorporate more mainly is movement. So no checking your phone, for example. Obviously, minimizing screen time is going to be massively important when it comes to focus, output, productivity every day. So in that break, try not to check your phone and go on social media. That's the last thing you should be incorporating. Tyler removed social media for a while, actually deactivated Instagram as well. But I definitely massively incorporate movement. So for example, in my flat, I have a basketball hoop in the kitchen. Something really simple, kind of looks a little bit silly, but what I'll do is I'll blast 2 or 3 songs for 10 minutes and just play basketball for 10 minutes. Just kind of relax, unwind, and kind of process my thoughts subconsciously. Therefore, in the next block, I'm ready to dive into it, kind of feel refreshed as much as possible, go straight into it from there.
Yeah, something that I've definitely helped with. The no social media, that I would look at my screen time, and I think when we first started working together, especially during lockdown as well, I think a lot of people's screen time really creeped up. There's could be anywhere from 3 to 7 hours depending on the day. And it just, you don't realize you're doing it. And then once I come off social media, the last few weeks, as of now, when I've got big projects ahead of me, I go completely locked in, and I'll deactivate Instagram, and I just get so much more work done because you just lose that attachment to your phone. And just things like that. One of the best things I think I learned from yourself was the opposite of focus is distractions. And so really one of the key things I did was just figure out what all the distractions were and just ruthlessly remove them. So.
Yeah, also in terms of dopamine and your response to dopamine also, so I mean looking at constant reminders on your phone, like likes for example, obviously checking people's social media, there's constant dopamine hit, and therefore your ability to focus on a task for 60 minutes or 50 minutes in terms of the block we already set up, very, very difficult to do. You're not going to want to go through a hard task in obviously 50 minutes and then apply that over 6 to 8 hours per day. What you're going to want to do instead is check your phone and get that immediate dopamine hit, and therefore think you're winning.
Yeah.
So obviously being aware of that is also really important, particularly as Tyler said in lockdown. Obviously in the UK we're probably approaching another lockdown also. And then also in terms of your environment, so for example, Tyler has his work set up here. He's not working with anyone else around him in his environment. So it's very easy to kind of go back to and revert to your lowest, well, really easy habits, some very basic things you do.
Yeah.
For example, checking your phone, eating poor food sources, etc., waking up later. So all of these things in terms of being accountable to someone, it's also really important as well. And you can do that with your friends, you can do that with someone like myself, for example. In the community we work with, everyone speaks to one another also. All really important things to be aware of.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of people maybe watching, if they're not entrepreneurs yet, they're not working for themselves yet, it's it's very hard, or I find it very hard. I was in an environment before I went full-time on my own. When you're working for somebody else, you've got to be in the office at a certain time, you've got to leave at a certain time, you're in an office with other people. When you work for yourself, you've got to wake up on time. My office is literally 5-10 meters away from my bedroom. It's very easy for me to stay in bed. There's all these things where it makes it 10 times harder because I'm the only one holding myself accountable. And so really I just have to force myself by, I don't go to my bedroom with my phone, I leave my phone in my kitchen, which means when I wake up, the first thing I do isn't check my phone, it's jump straight in the shower, go to work. And you've just got to really, I think, optimize your environment like that and actually try and remove those completely from arm's length.
Yeah, and also another variable to consider is also morning and evening routines. So for example, if you are running your own business and you find that your morning hasn't been hugely productive, you may often want to then work later into the evening as well. So for example, work until 10, 11, 12, 1 in the morning, for example. And often then you wake up the next day feeling very groggy as a result of that, because in terms of your hormones and their imbalances, they're pretty screwed up by that point. Also in terms of, we have a cortisol and also melatonin, you feel pretty brain foggy as a result of that. So you want to incorporate morning and evening routines and apply them very consistently. So for example, one thing you should be considering is a time in which you are switching off from work. So I primarily switch off at 8 p.m. and I go to bed at between 10 and 11. So for me, that enables 2 hours or 3 hours in which I'm just totally relaxing, and therefore I'm not processing ruminating thoughts, anything which is too stressful when it comes to business. And as a result of that, I can fall asleep very easily and with ease, as opposed to going to bed thinking, oh, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, I've got a lot of difficulties, a lot of stress upcoming, etc. And I think that's something that obviously Tyler has to potentially optimize as well moving forward. Yeah,
for sure. I'm not perfect. I'm nowhere near at 100% what my output could be, but I'm aware of that and I know what I need to do, and it's just a game of being disciplined and executing on that. But I'm so much further ahead than what I was 12 months ago from now, and I'm so grateful and fortunate that I'm learning this stuff now at this age rather than 10, 15, 20 years down the line, because I know now there's going to compound and it's going to allow my growth to be a lot more exponential during the future.
Yeah, especially at this level where, for example, Tyler's now approaching what I refer to as being like the pro leagues, so where he's doing very well with his info product business and real estate business. Obviously in terms of the financial aspect of things, he's now approaching the higher end of the spectrum. Therefore, he needs to be competing obviously at a high level with output and efficiency day in and day out, like the 0.1%, as opposed to reverting back to previous habits where he's performing at like 50% of his capacity. And obviously in terms of his intellect and his ability to apply his smarts and talents as well, it won't quite be there otherwise. So it's another really important variable to be considering. And again, if you look at the best of the best in any space, whether it be sports, whether it be business, they are all optimized to the 0.1% in terms of every variable of their life. When it comes to, again, sleep, nutrition, body, mind, time, and focus, everything is controlled in that ecosystem and optimized to the absolute 0.1%.
Yeah, and that's absolutely it. And if you can extract as much performance out of your body in one day than some people can do in 1 month or 1 week, then compound that over the course of 6 months, a year, 2 years, you're just going to be so much further ahead of your competition. And I think that's just one thing I massively slept on in the past and didn't really realize. And in fact, if you look at maybe my income over the last 12 months since implementing a lot of this into my life, the results are there in black and white. And so I can't recommend working with Billy enough. The level of knowledge this guy has is just like ridiculous. And is there any sort of other things you wanted to share?
Not particularly, no. I think in terms of variables you should be focusing on, first and foremost, it should be optimizing your sleep.
Yeah.
And in terms of the way in which you should approach that, if you don't have a metric tool like Aura, for example, it's just being consistent with your sleep start and end times, and therefore then applying your morning and evening routines consistently. And then when it comes to other variables to be focusing on after that, once you've got that optimized to the T, you should be then applying obviously nutrition strategies as well and systems. So what I mean by that is trying to mitigate brain fog. It's another really important variable to be assessing and considering also.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So most of you will realize or kind of have to deal with this on a daily basis where you may be working for 1 to 2, 3 hours and you can't quite process any decision correctly, nor process what the information you're being fed correctly either. And that's primarily down to brain fog. So in terms of variables which will remove that, what you want to do is make sure you're consuming good food sources for your body. So by conducting a biome test, for example, you'll be optimizing your gut health and therefore removing any form of brain fog from your system. As a result of that, in terms of those 4 hours you're working in the morning, they're going to be very, very well charged or optimized, if that makes sense.
That was one thing that was like so surprising to me. I did the Viome test, which checks your gut and shows you, I've got the app and it tells me what foods I should completely avoid and what foods I should minimize. And there's actually a lot of foods that was telling me I should completely avoid that I was probably eating on a daily basis. And I was suffering, I'd work really well throughout the day. I'd maybe have lunch and then I'd just crash. And that's one, down to probably meal timings, but also the food I'm eating. And now I've just completely tailored my diet around what's right for my body, because at the end of the day, there's no one diet that's perfect for everyone. Yeah,
when it comes to diets and applying like a healthy diet to your own life as well, most individuals that I start working with, like Tyler, for example, in the beginning, he may think he is consuming healthy food sources because they're kind of like generically healthy. Yeah. When it comes to what's optimized for his own gut and his actual microbiome, also that won't be the case. So for example, for some individuals, they don't respond very well to things like grass-fed beef, or it could be like sweet corn, it could be rice, it could be totally different food sources.
Spinach for me.
Yeah, spinach for Tyler, really weird ones. And as a result of consuming those food sources, it can be dealing with a lot of inflammation and therefore brain fog. So, when you guys have had like a really bad processed meal, like a fast food meal, like a burger, for example, and you go to work the next day, you feel like you're dealing with a lot of information, you kind of feel a bit puffy, and in terms of your ability to process thoughts, it's not quite there. You'll be experiencing that even if you're consuming healthy food sources that don't respond well with your own body, like for example, spinach in this instance. It'll be equally as bad as consuming a burger for Tyler, which sounds totally bizarre, but it is the actual case. So being aware of that is also a really important factor when it comes to being able to create really good decisions and optimize your ability to control your thoughts also, and obviously get the most out of yourself day to day.
And alcohol is I didn't realize how much of a killer alcohol is. Even just and we'll throw up on the screen like the Aura dashboard on the phone, or maybe what you see as well. But now that I can see every morning what my sleep was, just one glass of wine or one alcoholic drink just affects your sleep so much, which then goes into the next day, and it's just makes you think it's so not worth it. And then even if you have more than one drink, the results are just shockingly bad. It's not to say, I don't have the occasional drink, but it's now I've set firm boundaries and guidelines for myself, where it's maybe once a week, well, probably really once every 2 weeks, I'll have a drink. But even then, I'm so conscious of what it's doing to my body that actually I weigh it up, and a lot of time it's just not worth it.
Yeah, particularly when it comes to your body temperature and your REM sleep. And obviously REM sleep is really significant when it comes to reaching that flow state day in and day out, in terms of state of creativity, also ability to process thoughts, make decisions, etc. And at this level for Tyler, if he's making a decision, it could result in another 100,000 a month, 200,000 a month, or it could be the total opposite. Yeah. So these decisions are really important, and being able to optimize those variables which feed those decisions is obviously of vital importance.
Yeah. So what would you say are some action items people can do then following this video to start implementing this?
Yeah, so first and foremost, optimize your sleep. In terms of variables I already highlighted. So for example, your sleep start and end times. Again, pick up a metric device, like an Oura Ring. If you guys haven't already, they're around $300. They're not particularly expensive, and they're really, really great as a product. The dashboard's very user-friendly also, which is awesome. From there, then go about optimizing your gut health and microbiome. So conducting a biome test. Unfortunately, that is a shit test. So you literally shit in a pad and send it off to the States for feedback, which is kind of grim. And if it gets contaminated, what that means is it's spilled somewhere. So it's not particularly pleasant. But getting that feedback is really important, and then optimizing your food sources around that feedback is really important as well. And then obviously optimizing your environments in terms of work ergonomics, for example, also. So Tyler has a standing desk over here, therefore he can incorporate more movement into his day when he's working, as opposed to being in a seated position all day, which isn't particularly good for his body, nor his blood sugar regulation as well, which is another really important factor, nor his ability to concentrate and focus day in and day out. And you're not going to want to sit down for 8 hours per day. You're going to want to incorporate some movement. The body's not designed to sit down and be static for 8 to 12 hours per day.
Yeah, and then I say also now you check out your links, your website. What's the website we should go to?
peakperformanceeducation.com.
Yep, and take it from there. And like I say, I highly recommend working with this guy. You've only got to look at the caliber of other people in the same space that you work with, 6, 7, 8-figure entrepreneurs, and the results they've had. And as always, comment, like, subscribe, and we look forward to seeing you on the next video. Hey guys, how you doing? Tyler here, and I'm with. So I thought you were going to introduce yourself. you want to start?
I'm ready to go.
Or should I start?
You go first and I'll introduce myself as well.
Okay. Hey guys, it's Tyler Newman. How you doing?
Sorry, hang on. I need some notifications on my watch.
Mr. No Distractions over it.